Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a Studio Associate Professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, and I'm adjunct faculty at Columbia College Chicago in the Interior Architecture program. Shout out to all my students. I hope you're having a great day. It is a nice early summer day, 73 degrees outside. I hope the weather's great where you're at. Today we are going to be looking at Enscape Extras. So some really important things here to make your images more visually stimulating, more dramatic, and pull the viewer in. So if we look at this as our original image that we're starting with, that you see on the screen, and this is what we're going to end up with, a more visually stimulating, dramatic image that draws the viewer in. Alright, before we jump into the tutorial, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? Head on over to YouTube, click on the subscribe button, click on the bell to receive all the notifications. See what I'm up to. I just finished up a series of real-time rendering engine videos, so you'll want to check those out. Also connect with me on Instagram at my first name _ my last name. Connect with me and see what my students are up to, see what my latest video is. Alright, let's jump into this tutorial. Okay, so we're working in Enscape and let's look at our little outline. So Enscape 3.5 is the latest Enscape that was out at the time of this video. We're going to look at the visual settings. Alright, let's bring that window back up. Okay, so the visual settings, where do you find those? Those are in the Enscape window, the little eye with the slider. We're going to click on that eye with the slider. And the first thing we're going to look at is under atmosphere. And we're going to look at the sun brightness. Okay, typically the sun is too bright in Enscape by default. It's a little too hot and it kind of oversaturates the image. So we're going to look at turning that sun brightness down. It's a real simple slider. We can turn it down right here. If you need to turn it up, you could also turn it up. So let's turn that down a little bit, a little less sun. Alright, the second thing that we're going to be looking at is the shadow sharpness. And let's pan around in this image a little bit. And let's go to where we see some outlines of the shadow. So I'm focusing on the shadow of this tree right here. I can turn down the sharpness of it to make it look a little bit more realistic. Just toning that down and get more of a shadow map than a real sharp shadow. This is the real sharp shadow all the way up. And I'm going to tone that down a little bit. Alright, what's next on our agenda here? So we did the sun brightness, the sun sharpness. We're going to look at two-point perspective. Okay, so this is especially important when you're looking at a building that's a little bit taller than normal and you want to see the top of that building. So let's get our camera back. Let's go to our eye level here. And let's close this visual settings for a little bit. And let's minimize our Enscape window. So we're going to edit this camera so that it's looking up. So I'm over here in Rhino. I'm just going to use my function F6 or the F6 key if you're on a desktop. And I'm going to select the camera target. If I can find it, it's right there. And I'm going to raise it up. And when I raise it up, what you're going to see is the walls start to tilt in. You get a third point perspective. So this is, as I mentioned, when you're looking at taller buildings trying to see the top, they're going to lean backward. So these walls are leaning backward or tilting in. We can fix that in Enscape with Enscape's two-point perspective. So let's bring up our Enscape window and let's go to our visual settings. And here under camera, we can change this. Okay, so we're not seeing the tilted view yet. So let's sync. Click on the little sync button. And now we're seeing the tilted view. So there's the tilted view. Now it's grayed out. I can't change the perspective. I think if I sync it one more time, it will show me that perspective. There we go. Now we can change the perspective to a 2-point. And there you go, it straightens out those walls. They're no longer tilting back. So that's really helpful. Alright, the next thing, which I think is one of the most important, is lighting a scene with an HDRI image. So what's an HDRI image? It's a high dynamic range image. And if we go over to the web for a second, and I just did a Google search for HDRI, you'll see what is an HDRI file. It's short for high dynamic range image. And what it does is it gives you a lot more range of exposure, and it's also a globe map. So if we go over to the images, you'll see that it's sometimes a full 360 degrees like this one here. So you get a lot of range of dynamic color and saturation and exposure, and you get a whole 360 degree image that can make you can apply to the virtual globe in your scene. So let's get a closer look at that over in Enscape. Alright, so let's actually go back and download a couple of these HDRI images. So I'm at HDRI Haven, where you can find free HDRI images. And I'm going to go over to skies, and I'm going to download two drastically different ones. I'm going to download this one with a clear sky and it has a sun in it. So I'm going to download that one, and I don't need super high resolution. I'm going to download the 1K. You probably could go a little higher than 1K, maybe 2K, depending on how you're outputting your image. Alright, so I'm going to download that one. And I'm going to pick another one that's drastically different. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to pick this pink sunset meadow. That's a really nice one. And let's go to 1K and download that. Okay, let's see how we're going to put these into Enscape. So if we go to sky, you're going to see, I don't see it under sky, so where are we at? Let's look under image, atmosphere, sky. Okay, yeah, it is under sky. I just not looking at the right place. So under sky, under horizon, we can change the source to skybox. And we can load the skybox from file. So let's see the drastic one. Let's see the sunset one first. Okay, so that loads in, and pay attention to the rendering itself. The rendering itself changes hue and color and saturation and lighting based on this HDRI. And we'll look into this a little bit further, but let's change the HDRI so you can get a feel for this changing in real time. So now you see it gets overexposed and really bright based on the skybox, which is really sunny. So let's go to the sunset one and take a look at some extra settings for that. Okay, one thing we can set is brightest point at sun direction. So there's a sun in that HDRI, and that brightest point is going to show up in Enscape if I turn this on. And you'll see if I start to rotate this around, there you'll see where the sun is coming from. And I'm going to put the sun right looking through that pavilion there. I'm going to put the sun right there. So it's kind of being lit from behind. Alright, so that gives you a little feel for how HDRI images can light your scenes. Alright, let's take a look at some image settings. So let's go to image. And we can do things like change the highlights. So if I raise this value up, you see the highlights get really bright. If I lower them down, they're a little less intense. So I can do that. Then we have the shadows. If I raise this all the way up, you'll see the foreground get really dark where it's in shadow. If I lower it down, it kind of lights the foreground up a little bit. So I'm going to keep that pretty low. Alright, we have motion blur, which is really only helpful for scenes that are moving, for animation. So not too helpful in this image. But we have lens flare, which is really helpful in this image. As I turn that up, you see I really get that lens flare showing up. Let me rotate that a little bit. Yeah, so we can really see that. Okay, so that I put the lens flare all the way up to 100%. Now bloom kind of gives the image and the geometry an outer glow, which is really interesting. So I'm going to turn that up, that bloom effect, and really get that outer glow on the building itself. Then we have vignette, which focuses in on the middle portion of the image, or the focal point of it. So it's one of these kind of Instagram filters that we're all accustomed to. So I'm just going to bloom that in, or vignette that in a little bit. And then we have chromatic aberration, which slightly decreases the image sharpness. So it makes it a little bit softer when we pull this up. When it's really low, it's a sharper image, and when it's high, it makes the edges a little bit fuzzy. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. The last thing that I really want to look at is the depth of field, which focuses the camera on a certain place in the image. So if I go to main, and you see I have depth of field, and it's set to 0 by default. If I increase that, it's going to blur. You see that really blurring the back of the image. And we can set what our focal point is as I move this focal point slider, so you see that coming through. So I'm going to focus it on the front of the image. If I focus it, say, in the middle of the image, and I turn that depth of field down a little bit, that's going to be the sharpest place, is right here in the middle where this chair is, and everything else is a little bit blurry. Well, I'm going to pull that field of view, not the field of view, I'm going to pull the depth of field focal point more toward the foreground, so it focuses on the flowers in the foreground. And I'm going to take that depth of field down a little bit. Alright, it's a little bit too blurry. Let's take it down a little bit more. Maybe right about there. Alright, so we get a much nicer image than we started with. And just to remind you of what we're going for here, we're going from this to something like that. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. My head's going to pop up. If you haven't subscribed, you can click on my head. 2 videos are going to pop up in the upper right and the lower right. You can look at some more Enscape videos. If you found this video helpful, give me a thumbs up and let me know why in the comments. Alright, I will see you on the next one.